Welcome back to the Netman Podcast. This is going to be episode 7, and tonight we have Steelhead Alley Outfitters. Patrick Robinson, our friend, is going to be joining us. He is a vendor at the Great Lakes Fishing Expo, which is a sponsor of this show. And we're going to learn a little bit tonight, Aaron. I'm not real keen on the steelhead stuff, so I'm kind of excited / anxious to have this conversation. And one more thing, guys, if you're finding any value in these, it will help us a ton wherever you're listening. It be Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. If you could please subscribe or even leave us a comment of some type of content you would want to hear. You ready to go, Aaron?
I'm ready to go.
All right, let's bring him in.
Everyone, this is Patrick Robinson, one of the founding fathers of Steelhead Alley Outfitters. So we're just going to pick his brain tonight and learn as much as we can about what makes this region a great region for steelhead and what makes Steelhead Alley Outfitters such an amazing guide service. So Patrick, I guess just get us started with kind of where it all began. Like, how did you go from just being an avid outdoorsman to running a guide service?
That's a good question. I was never one of those guys that had the dreams and the aspirations of doing it. It just kind of happened. I've always been an outdoorsman. Started out like most people, fishing with my dad with gear. Grew up down in southern Indiana, which is not really known as being a fly fishing hotspot, but somewhere along the line, I saw somebody with a fly rod, and it caught my attention. It was something I always wanted to do growing up. Flirted with it a little bit, growing up, but was quickly discouraged because I had no clue how to do it, and so I always fell back to my spinning rods and bait casters because I was all about bass, and out of high school was fishing bass tournaments with buddies and all that kind of stuff. And it wasn't until after I got married and got out on my own. That was kind of when the internet was coming on really strong, and you could research stuff and learn stuff a lot easier than you could growing up, where you had to go pick up a book or head to the library and all that kind of stuff. And so I just decided it was something that I wanted to do, and started watching stuff online. Had one experience out in Missouri that really kind of cranked the wheel, so to speak, and got me going. And from there, it was just kind of a downhill slide into a dark hole that I haven't come out of since. And so, that would have been late 90s. And so I would say, I took off pretty quick, got into fly tying right after that. And so by early 2000s, I was running pretty hard on the fly rod. And 2006, I had a conversation with one of the more notable fly shops in the Midwest, and just talked to them about what it looks like to be a guide and blah, blah, blah. And next thing you know, the guy's like, well, I need somebody, so why don't you guide for us? And that would have been 2006. So early 2007, I started guiding, and shortly after that, first few trips, I ended up connecting with the guy who I started Steelhead Alley Outfitters with, and that was Greg Sinyo. And Greg's a pretty well-known name in the fly fishing industry, most notably because of his fly tying material development. But that was 2007. He was actually at the time, he was a field editor for a regional newsprint, and he just happened to be surfing the internet one day, and he came across my blog. There used to be a website out there; it's no longer around anymore, but it was called flyfishblogger.com, and I had one of the top-rated blogs on that website. And he stumbled onto it and basically read all of my material in a couple of days, and next thing you know, my phone's ringing.
So what kind of stuff was on the blog? Was it mostly like educational? Was it just kind of a log of your outings? Like,
Yeah, it was just me basically telling the stories of all of my different outings. It was anything from fly fishing to upland bird hunting, because I do a lot of different stuff out there. And so basically, it was just they were looking for somebody that could do an outdoor column, and so I did whatever I had to tell a story about. I would share those stories and kind of hit the different audiences that they had. And so that conversation with Greg turned into me writing for that newsprint. And then shortly after that, he had been involved in the fly fishing industry, a bit longer than I had. I definitely grew up with a lot more of it more readily available because he was from Northwest Pennsylvania. And so the next question that came was he was wanting to start a fly fishing outfitter. He had guided for a number of years with another entity and was interested in getting something started. He said, "But I'd like to partner up with somebody. Is that something you think you'd want to do?" And I said, "I don't know." I said, I mean, we hadn't even met in person at that point in time. It was all phone calls and that kind of thing. I said, "So why don't we just grab rods and go fish?" And so we went and spent some time on the water together and quickly devised a plan. And by late 2007, it was up and running, and we never looked back.
Nice.
So that's the shortest way I can tell you how it all came to be.
Patrick, I got a question for you, and you probably understand. I'm going to go back to where you mentioned you had an experience. I think you said in Missouri, because I'm a bass guy. You've been a bass guy. You've done the tournaments, so you get it. You were addicted to that, obviously, at some point. I personally couldn't imagine not, you know, sitting down I couldn't imagine sitting down the bass rod. So I got to know, what was this experience that made you give up bass fishing and, transfer over to the fly fishing world?
I always tell guys when they ask that question, I say my first question is, "Are you a deer hunter?"
Yes.
And most of the time, guys shake their head and they go, "Yeah." And I said, "How did you start out?" They said, "With a gun." I said, "Where'd you go to?" And they said, "With a bow."
Yep. Yep.
I said, "It's no
Yep.
different, man." I said, "I started out with a gun and I got good at it and I was looking
Yep.
for the next challenge and I stepped into the world of the fly rod and
I can respect
you know,
that for
it's
sure.
it was just a different way of doing it." Now, that being said, man, I've now hit a place in my life where I was down at the expo this year and I'm like, "Dang, dude, I bought a whole bunch of gear I haven't had in years."
Nice.
I'm like, I want to get back
Yeah.
into it, man. I want to get out there and I want to throw some plastics, and stand on the bow of the boat and work a
Yeah.
trolling motor,
Yeah.
um, so you do find yourself missing the roots of where you started and going
Yeah.
back, and I'm not opposed to getting out there and doing the old stuff, but it was the allure of that next level of challenge. It was the mystery of it too, man. I mean, back in the late '90s, I can't remember the exact year, but that's when A River Runs Through It came out, and that like revolutionized like the whole fly fishing industry. Everybody saw that movie with Brad Pitt, and everybody wanted to
Well,
fly
Okay.
everyone
fish.
wanted to just like float down the river, like caught in the current, trying to reel in a fish at the same time.
That's
That's
right,
what it was.
right, yeah, exactly. So it was. I always saw it from a distance growing up, and it was just like this dream. You wanted to do it, you wanted to understand it, and so yeah, it's cool for a lot of reasons, man. And there's a lot about the sport of fly fishing that you just can't get throwing
Right.
gear. It's just
Well,
a and there's a lot of mystery
there's
surrounding it
there
too.
seems to be, as we get a little older, probably more of a peacefulness and tranquility that you can respect and appreciate that you can't get. I mean, there's nothing that beats flying down a lake on a bass boat, but you know what I'm saying. So I can
Yeah,
see
but
all that for sure.
midday when you have all the ski boats and pontoons around, that
Yes.
tranquility is quickly lost.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
For sure.
Um,
Yeah.
in our very
Yeah.
first episode, Jesse asked me if I couldn't bass fish anymore, what would I do? And I said I'd probably learn how to fly fish. And it was because there was just so much to learn, and it's so complex, or it can be at least. without knowing anything, like all the different flies, all the different lines, all the different rod weights and lengths and all that. And it's just, I mean, that's a lot to take in. So how long was that journey for you? Once you were like, hey, I had this experience in Missouri, I want to learn fly fishing.
Yeah. It's not as complex as what we make it out to be in our minds. I've been out of the gear world for, you know, 25 years, 30 years probably. And just in that 30 years, the amount of things that have changed and evolved with the gear side of things has left me somewhat overwhelmed. Like, I mean, dude, when I got out, like, braid was like just starting to happen. So I had no clue about braid. Now, man, there's all kinds of stuff out there with braid, and you use it on certain rods and you don't use it on other rods. I'm talking to all these gear guys, like, you guys are going to help me out because
Yeah.
I'm lost. But you guys, if I were to sit here and talk to you guys, man, you'd be talking about it like we're buttering bread. It's no big
Right.
deal, right? It's not complex to you because you've been in it. It's I don't think either one of them are all as complex as what we think they might be. So it's a pretty easy learning
Okay.
curve, really. I mean, when it comes to weight rods, it's probably, I would venture to say, I'd say it's simpler than the gear world because fly rods are basically built on a number system. So the most ultralight, I'll use gear terms. So the most ultralight fly rod that I know that's produced, I think they still produce them, is a 000. So there's only one company that does a 000 and a 00. Anything below a one, and I think that's Sage. So, but they basically go from there up to, I think the heaviest rods I've seen are like 14 weight. And so each one of those, smaller number is more ultralight, bigger number is heavier duty. It's like a 14 weight. You're talking about a blue water rod, man. You're out using that to pull tuna out of the ocean, right? And right there, lies one of the misconceptions of fly fishing. That fly fishing isn't just something that you do to catch trout. Um, you can go out and you can catch mako sharks on fly rods. You can catch tuna on fly rods. You can catch marlin and sailfish, and you can go out and catch bluegill and crappie. So most people just think, oh, because they see it on TV, that it's all about trout and nothing but trout, and that there's nothing that could be further from the truth. So as far as rod selection, it's just knowing what weight rod you want for the species that you're chasing. And just like with anything else, if you want to feel the fight a little bit more, you size down the rod so it's a little on the light side, so you can have a little bit more fun. And if you want to horse them in, you size the rod up. So it's not nearly as difficult as what most people think. And for the average fly fisherman, they're not going to be as broad as some guys are. They're not going to be traveling all over the world and fishing the salt and fishing freshwater and fishing Alaska and fishing the Caribbean. So some guys, they'll get away with having like a 3 or 4 weight rod for trout, and maybe a 6 weight for some lighter bass stuff, and maybe a 7 or 8 weight for some of the heavier bass stuff, chasing smallmouth and ditch pickles, and as we call largemouth, or fishing rivers. And so you could get away with just several rods, but other guys are going to have, I've got everything from a 000 all the way up to I think the biggest rod I've got is a 12 weight. And I've got a number of rods in between, but I'm going from fishing for tarpon that can be, you can get big tarpon up to 200
Shoo.
pounds, and you can be catching little mountain trout that are, 8 inches long. So, and everything in between. So it's not as complicated as what people think. When you start looking at spinning rods and bait casting rods, and you got, medium heavies and
Yeah.
extra heavies, and all this. It's to me, that's far more confusing than the selection of a fly
Well,
rod is.
fortunately, all these rod companies started like making specialized rods that are this is a drop shot rod, and this is a frog rod, and this is a jig rod. And it's all the same stuff. They just put a name on it finally. So guys, when they're shopping, can be like, oh, I need a frog rod. So Steelhead Alley Outfitters, when you guys started, because there's such a broad spectrum of fish that you can catch, did you start off with just targeting trout? Like what was the beginning phases of the guide service?
So the guide service was, I mean, when we started, it was all about steelhead. That has nothing to do with the name. The reason why we call it Steelhead Alley Outfitters is because the geographical area of the South Shore of Lake Erie has that nickname. So the I-90 corridor, basically from middle of Ohio clear over to Buffalo, they call that the Steelhead corridor because every stream that I-90 crosses probably has steelhead in it at some point in time throughout the year. So we named the outfitter Steelhead Alley Outfitters because of that geographical name that it had. But yeah, when we started out, it was all about guiding for steelhead. That was what we were doing. That's what we were after. And then once we got it started, then we started branching out and offering, because the steelhead streams are also, shortly after the spring steelhead run, turn into smallmouth streams. We got all those big footballs running in out of the lake. And so we started doing fishing for and guiding for the smallmouth that were coming in. And then as we started acquiring boats and lightweight rafts and that kind of thing, we started going in and hitting inland rivers and fishing for some of the native populations on some of our inland streams and that kind of thing. And just started branching out and trying to offer something that allowed for some opportunities different times of the year. But steelhead was definitely what we were targeting in day one.
It kind of, like when I read through your social media and just read about your business, it kind of looks like you've built like a fleet of guides of some sort. How does that whole system work, or how do you recruit guys just like you were recruited, or do guys approach you, or how do you vet some of these guys?
Yeah, so I'm pretty
Sure.
picky. So um, you know, there's only been a couple of guys that we've ever like hired in um, just on somebody else's recommendation. Most of the time, they're kind of homegrown. They're either good buddies of guys that work for us and they already know who they are, or in some cases, we had one guy that used to work for us, and he worked for us for, man, I don't know how many years he was with us, but he basically started out as a client. He was like 14 or 15 years old, and his mom was bringing him up for half-day birthday trips.
Nice.
And he was just a sharp young kid, and who had a passion for what we were doing, and he absolutely loved being on the water. And so early on, we saw that, and we just asked him, "Hey, is this something you'd ever want to do?" And he was like, "Heck yeah, man!" And now he's guided and still guides here on the alley, and spends all of his summers in Alaska.
Awesome.
So we basically watched him grow up and trained him all the way up through his teen years. And then when he got old enough, we brought him on the staff. So we've done a lot of that. On our website, I even say, I'm not interested in the guy who thinks he's the fishiest guy around,
Right.
and thinks
Right.
he's the rock star of all fishermen. You can go pound your own water, dude.
Nobody
I don't need
likes
your
that
ego,
guy.
Right. And so I'm like, I'd much rather have the guy that says, I absolutely love being on the water, but be honest with you, I don't think I'm qualified, but I'd like to be.
Yeah.
And if that guy's willing to knock on the door, I'm willing to have the conversation and see where they're at, and see whether or not they fit the bill. But yeah, a lot of the team members that we have come to us that way, and some have been previous clients. Some just knocked on the door and said we'd like to do this. So there's a variety, but yeah, we basically bring them on. Right now, we're currently at 5 guys on staff right now, and keeping them pretty busy. I mean, we're booked solid all the way out through almost mid-April
That's
at this
awesome.
point with everybody. So we're keeping them busy, and but that's kind of how we've done it over the years. Is just homegrown. It's kind of interesting. We've had quite a few clients over the years who have came as clients who have turned into guides for us and spent years with
It
us.
all starts with
So
passion, right? So if the passion's there, I
that's right.
mean, anything can happen. So
You can't give
right,
somebody passion. They either got it or they don't.
right.
You know.
You had mentioned the spring steelhead run. When does that kick off for you guys, and then when do you see it kind of trailing off, and then you transitioning to smallmouth or another species?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question, man. You know, I've never been one who jumps on the bandwagon of global warming, but I'll tell you what, man, these last few years have been jacked up.
Yeah.
So normally, I would tell you, well, every year the spring run starts when the ice goes out. So obviously, you guys are from around Northeast Ohio, so we just came off of a heck of a winter, first one we've actually had in a while. So we had a ton of ice. I mean, it was piled high and stacked high in the rivers for a while. So as soon as the ice goes out is when the spring run starts. But the question is well, what happens if you don't have a spring or if you don't have a hard winter? So the last two winters. I think last winter we had exactly 2 weeks of ice that kept us off of the rivers. The winter before that, they didn't even freeze. So people are like, well, what happens if it doesn't freeze? Well, if it doesn't freeze, we can fish literally all the way through the winter. So the fish come in the fall, and they're in until the water gets too warm, and they're forced to go back to the lake. So the only thing in that period that keeps us from fishing is if the rivers freeze over. So this year the rivers froze over right around the beginning of the year. It got bad enough that we couldn't fish, and so it was basically the second week of March. The beginning of the second week of March is when we finally had all of the ice jams and everything blown out of the rivers, and the season actually started and kicked off for us. So that's when it starts, is when the ice goes out. And again, it's a variable with when it's done. It all depends on how quickly the weather warms and the water warms. It's all about water temperature. Steelhead are nothing more than a migratory rainbow trout, and so they have a threshold that they can handle. But once that water starts getting into the 60s, it's pretty much time to back off. Because if you start catching those fish, and a lot of guys don't know this, and as an outfitter, we try and kind of lead, if you will, ethically and morally. If the water temperature gets to the point where we realize it's going to be lethal for these fish, and a lot of people are like, well, they're hatchery fish. It doesn't matter. Um, we have a little bit different spin on that. Ethics and morals are ethics and morals. And so what you learn here with us, you may take somewhere else where they've got wild fish, and they're trying to protect and be conservationists of a species that is far more susceptible to something that's sustained by hatcheries, right? And so if the water gets to the point where it's too warm, we'll back off. It's happened a couple of times over the years where we've literally canceled trips in the middle of our spring season because the water just got too warm. And now we've had it get too warm and then, have a snowstorm come through, and dump a bunch of snow, and the water temperatures crush and comes back down, and we're right back into fishing. But if everything happens like a normal year, those water temperatures just continue to climb. On an average year, historically, I've been doing this for about 17, 18 years. And historically, we've always been able to fish through the end of April. There's always fish around, and the water temperature is still cool enough that you can catch them without having to worry about killing them from fighting them. And so if everything goes as planned, we hope that we'll be able to get through the lion's share of April this year, just because of the water temps that we had with the ice and whatnot. But again, if you get a whole bunch of 70-degree days and no precipitation, that's going to cool the water off and flush the streams and keep them cool, it could come to a screeching halt pretty quick. The good thing about the spring is when the water warms, you always know that you got the smallmouth coming in on their heels. So as the steelhead are falling out and getting back out in the lake, all the smallmouth are coming in. So most of the time when we book those trips in late April, we always tell everybody that you're booking a mixed bag trip. We tell them there's a possibility that you can get steelhead, but there's a really good chance that you'll also get smallmouth. And so that's kind of how we handle that transition period.
I've heard this explained before, but for someone listening that doesn't know, what is there difference? Is there a difference between steelhead and trout, or steelhead and rainbow trout?
Yeah, so steelhead and rainbow trout are the exact same fish. Scientific name is the exact same. The only difference between a rainbow trout and a steelhead is their behavior. So a rainbow trout is a trout that is born in a stream of some kind and stays in that stream its entire life. A steelhead is a rainbow trout that is hatched in a stream and then leaves that stream, goes downriver to a larger body of water. It could be either salt water or fresh water. And if depending on which one that is, depends on the classification. So if it goes to salt water, they're considered an anadromous fish, which means migratory, going to salt water and then coming back to fresh water. If they're going from a freshwater stream to a freshwater body, such as our Great Lakes, they're considered potamodromous. And so whether they're potamodromous or anadromous, one's saltwater, one's freshwater. That is the only difference between a steelhead and rainbow trout, is that that steelhead migrate. And the reason why they get so much bigger is because of that migration. They're going to a place that has a whole lot more food, and a lot bigger food than what they're going to get in just a local stream or river. So that's why they get so much larger.
I've got a question for you, Patrick. You spoke of food, and I like to eat. So are these a good eating fish? And I guess you, as a guide, obviously wanting to protect the resource at all times. Do you like where the limits are? Where is there a season where you can keep these? Do you think it's good or bad? Where are you at on that? And are they good eating, I guess, was my biggest question.
Yeah, so are they good eating? That just depends on who you talk to. I've heard a lot of people say that they don't like them at all, and I've had other people say that they think they're the best fish that they've ever eaten. I personally have only had a couple. Everybody would think that I'd probably eaten a ton of them, but we're, as a fly fishing entity, we're catch and release on everything that we chase. So, but I will tell you this, because I've got I know a lot of people that do fish for them and keep them. So steelhead aren't they're not like salmon in the effect that when they come into the rivers, that they eventually die, before they once they're done spawning. Salmon, when they come into the river to spawn, they die, they're done. Steelhead can actually come in, spawn, go back to the lake, and do that several times, and die from old age. But one of the similarities is when salmon come into the streams, anywhere around the world, they come in and they're all silver. I don't care whether you're talking about pink salmon, talking about cohos, you're talking about kings, you're talking about sockeye, chum. Every single one of those salmon species, when they come into the river, they are silver. But shortly after they come into the river, they start into a metamorphosis and a physical change, and they turn very bright colors, like chum salmon will get this marbling on their sides. It's pretty wicked looking, pretty cool. Sockeye salmon will turn like a real dark red, as will king salmon. Pink salmon will get this huge hump on their back. That's why they're called hump. Their nickname is humpies, because they get those big old humps on their back. And then all salmonids will get hooked jaws, and they call those a kype. So trout aren't going to go through such a severe metamorphosis, but they will come in and they'll go from dime bright silver to taking on more colors. Some of them will get really dark. They'll have a big pink stripe down their side. They'll get the pink cheek patch. And the males, they call them bucks, will get somewhat of a hooked jaw, and they'll also develop larger teeth during the spawning process. And it's basically all of this happens. It's kind of the equivalent of a whitetail or a muley, right? These bucks grow their antlers for one reason, for the mating season. And that's the whole reason that all these fish go through this change, get these hooked jaws, get these big teeth, and take on the colors, is because they're going to show their dominance. They're going to fight each other, because everybody's fighting over the woman, right? That's how it works. So back to your question, good to eat, not good to eat. I've always been told that if you want to eat them, the best way to eat them is when they're dime bright silver. So when they first come into the river, that the flesh of that fish is going to be at its prime. So most of the time we tell people, are like, well, can we keep them in the river? I'm like, well, you can, but most guys are going to tell you that it's better if you keep them when you catch them out in the lake, because they're always dime bright out in the lake.
I watched a video earlier today, kind of like I said, trying to study up for you here, and I saw a guy mention he caught a chrome. He kept saying it was a chrome. So is that something like what you're talking about?
Yeah. So when we say dime bright or we say chrome, that they're just talking about a fresh fish that's just silver, And so they're describing the coloration of the fish. So everybody's always chasing chrome. Cool. That's what they say, because the fresh fish, the ones that are chrome, are going to be the most energetic. They're the freshest ones just out of the lake. They've just come into the rivers, and that's kind of the prized fish that everybody wants to go after. Now, the one exception, going back to eating them, a lot of guys, they don't care whether the fish is chrome or it's colored up. If it's going on a smoker, it's going on a smoker. And, but my thing is, you can smoke anything.
Except for bass. We don't eat bass.
Yeah, we don't do that. That's taboo.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So Jesse asked about like state limits and regulations and stuff, and the population. Like, how do you feel like the steelhead population's doing in this region?
Yeah, so I mean, right now it's still doing okay. There's been some recent news coming out of Pennsylvania with their stocking program that we think is going to cause some of our numbers to drop over the next few years. They basically had a test result come back showing positive for, I believe, whirling disease over in one of their hatcheries in Pennsylvania, which flagged the feds to come in and check out their hatchery. Turns out that the test was actually a false positive. But in the process of them finding out that it was a false positive, they found out that Pennsylvania was transporting eggs from the Lake Erie drainage up along Lake Erie over the mountain to their fish hatchery in the Allegheny drainage, which in the feds world is a major no-no. So they found out that was taking place, because they were freaking out, and you can imagine they were like, well, there haven't been any reported cases of whirling disease in the Allegheny drainage, and the Allegheny drainage turns into the Ohio drainage, turns into the Mississippi drainage, turns into half the water in our country, right? And so obvious reason for concern, but the feds put the smack down on that pretty quick and said, you can't do that. And so, in effect, they basically cut Pennsylvania's stocking program by 50%.
What is whirling disease?
That's above my pay grade. It's just it's some kind of a neurological disease that's passed to fish that cause them to kind of lose their head, and they'll literally be found just spinning in the water, I think. But it's definitely something that you don't want in your watersheds. So, so anyhow, the population right now is good. Obviously, when they stock fish, those fish can come back at different intervals. If a fish comes back after 1 year, they're considered a jack, or they've got several nicknames for them. But a jack is kind of the common term that they use for them, and they'll be in that 18-inch range, maybe 20 inches on the big end. And then a 2-year fish, So most of the time the fish aren't coming back until they're like 2-3 years old, which would be like a 22 to 24 inch fish. And then they just continue getting bigger, the longer that they're alive. The largest fish that I've ever had a client land with me, and it's the largest one that I've ever heard of being landed, that was landed on the stream, was just shy of 38 inches. And we took measurements on it and submitted it to the DNR, and they estimated that fish to be 18, 19 pounds. So they do get quite large if they survive long enough. But yeah, right now the populations are good. We're getting fish, but there's changes going on within the stocking programs in the states. They've got different strains that they're stocking due to availability. Ohio trades catfish for steelhead eggs from Michigan, and if those Michigan eggs aren't available, then they're going to West Virginia and getting a different strain. And so it's kind of all over the map right now on what's being stocked, which gives you a fair amount of variety of the strains that are coming in. But right now we're holding our own, but there is a little bit of a concern with what just transpired over in Pennsylvania and how long it's going to take them to recover their numbers and get them back. So
with this region being known as Steelhead Alley, that would lead me to believe that this is kind of a steelhead destination place. Is that accurate, or are there other places like Michigan or upstate New York or out west that is much better fishing?
yeah, so the thing about so the answer to the question is yes, it's definitely a destination for people. It's not the only destination. The basic regions that you can catch steelhead are there's some areas in Alaska where you can get steelhead. You can get steelhead in the Pacific Northwest, so that would be considered. I mean, they can get them all the way down into Northern California, but Northern California, Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia is kind of where steelhead really became known. Those are anadromous fish. I've got a buddy who actually used to guide with us here, who moved out to northern Idaho and bought him a sweet piece of land right on the Clearwater River. And the Clearwater is actually a part of the Columbia River drainage. And so he was just sending me pictures the other day of fish that they were catching a few weeks back. And they were absolutely just the most beautiful fish in the world. And they had traveled 500 plus miles of river to get there, And so the Pacific Northwest has always kind of been steeped in the history for steelhead fishing. And it's kind of been, all the Great Lakes fisheries have been, kind of the, how shall I say, hate to use the term, but the bastard child, You're not the real steelhead guys in the Great Lakes. It's the Pacific Northwest. But the problem now is, and they'll tell you, I mean, I've got guys I know that guided out there for years, and they'll tell you now, don't waste your time. The steelhead numbers are so down out there due to just a lot of different reasons. But the dams that are on a lot of those rivers have done, a lot of damage to the steelhead returns and the salmon returns and all that kind of stuff. And so you don't see the numbers out there that they used to see. I mean, you can go out there and fish for an entire week and never catch a fish, never hook a fish, And I always tell people when they come here to fish, like, understand that steelheading was never intended to be a numbers game. And the worst thing you can do is turn people into, in the industry, what they call fish whores. It's all about how many fish can you catch so your ego can be inflated about, And so steelheading has always been not a numbers game. It's been a quality game. It's been about the experience. It's chasing the unicorn, But fortunately, unfortunately, the sheer numbers that they stock in the Great Lakes makes the Great Lakes, and I'm going to say mostly Michigan and our area of Steelhead Alley, probably the most sought after destination for steelhead, especially in the lower 48, without a doubt. I mean, I hate to even say it, but there's guys that come out and hit it right, and they'll put 30 fish to the net in a
Holy
day.
cow.
Wow.
we don't like to tell people that. And when they do have that kind of day, I tell my guys, like, make sure that they understand that, like, a good day is 2 or 3 fish. Like, they need to understand that, because they're going to come back expecting to have that day again, and they are going to get their butts handed to them, because the conditions aren't going to be the same. The river is going to be up. It's going to be off color, or the fish aren't going to be there in those kinds of numbers. Or, I mean, you guys fish, you know what it's like. Sometimes they're there and they just don't give a rip that you're fishing, but every now and then guys hit it right and they're like, dude, this is amazing. I'm like, yeah, it is amazing, but don't expect that to be your everyday, because it just doesn't happen like that. But yeah, we have people travel from literally all over the country. I mean, we've had people travel from other parts of the world to fish for
That's
steelhead
awesome.
here.
Do you think, in combination with the stocking programs, does it have anything to do with the number of tributaries that come off of Lake Erie? Because it seems like we've got quite a few rivers that, if you look online in the spring, I mean, or even in the fall, I mean, there's times where you've got guys on the bank just nearly shoulder to shoulder on
Yeah.
several tributaries.
Yeah. We try and avoid that, but and that's typically down in the very lowest areas of the river. That's there's one stream over in Pennsylvania called Walnut Creek. It's affectionately called the Nut,
Okay.
because it's just it's crazy, dude. We don't go anywhere close to that place because it's literally people standing shoulder to shoulder and screaming at each other, and it's not the experience that anybody wants. But the other thing about we do have a lot of streams on Lake Erie. The downside, it depends on who you're talking to. Some people just love it. I personally don't prefer the smaller streams, but smaller streams are easier to fish for a lot of people. Bigger water requires more skill and more knowledge and understanding of how the fish move. You can't just expect to pull up to a small hole on a super narrow stream and expect that there's going to be all your fish right there in a barrel for you, but that does make it easier. And if they're stocking sheer numbers like they do, sometimes those smaller streams are just a magnet for people to go fish. So the 2 largest streams on the alley, one's in Ohio and one's in New York. So we've got the Grand River, which is right here in Northeast Ohio, and then Cattaraugus Creek over in New York is probably the what I would consider the gem of Steelhead Alley. It's that place is just it's an unbelievable piece of water. It really is. But those are much larger streams. A lot of places you're not gonna cast across those streams. But most of our rivers here you can cast across, easily.
So I'm actually down here in Southeast Ohio, Patrick, which just a redneck. I've never even held a fly rod, I don't think, but I got a couple tackle questions for you. This video I watched earlier. So this guy seemed to be using fly tackle. He had like a 9-foot rod, and but he was using like a float and then some type of egg. Is that considered fly fishing, or do you have to actually have a fly tied on? How does that lingo go? And second part to that question, if an old redneck like me wanted to come up and join you for a trip, do you just let us use a spinning rod if we want to?
Yeah, so let me hit that first part of the question. So when people hear the word fly, again, I think oftentimes they automatically assume that we're in the movie a river runs through it and we're fishing for that trout on that stream, and it's a dry fly that's going to be thrown out there and it's going to sit on the surface of the water.
That's my vision of it. Yeah.
So that's the vision that most people have when they think of fly fishing. And that certainly is a big part of fly fishing, especially if you're in the trout world. And so, but that is like literally one sliver of what fly fishing is. So you can fish dry flies. So when people say flies, it's a general term for anything you are tying on the end of your line that you are deploying and casting with a fly rod. So that can be a midge, which is a really small, dry fly. They tie those things down to like size 32. You can't even hardly see a size 32 hook. To me, it's like beat my head against the wall. I ain't wasting my time, right? But trout like to eat that stuff in the middle of the winter when there's nothing else around, right? They'll eat these little midges off the surface or midge larvae. Like if you ever seen a mosquito larva in a barrel swimming around, they'll tie stuff like that, right? So if it's on top of the water, it's considered a dry fly. Anything that is subsurface is categorized as either a nymph, which would be some kind of an aquatic insect of some kind, a streamer, which could imitate some kind of small bait fish or large aquatic insects of some kind, like dragonfly. They would still consider those nymphs, but small streamers would be small minnow imitations. But I could run over to my fly tying desk and I could bring in a fly that's 18 inches long, right? That would be something we would use for muskie. So anything that is subsurface is either a nymph, an egg, or a streamer, pretty much. And those will all be fished subsurface. So back to your what you saw. You saw this guy with a fly rod, and then he had what looked like a bobber,
a float, a leader, a couple split shots, maybe.
Yeah, we jokingly say in the fly fishing world that we're too good for bobbers, so we call them strike indicators, right?
Well, because that comes in many forms, right? Like you can have like a little bubble thing. You could have a ball of yarn or whatever it is.
Yeah, that's the thing, Aaron. Like, I'm watching this video and this dude's talking about maybe millimeters of the bobber, and like to me, like Patrick mentioned earlier, like let's not overcomplicate it, because I'm sure I could just go to Walmart, buy some bobbers, and go find a stream and probably catch a steelhead eventually. But like these bobbers, like he had several different sizes of just, I call them bobbers, but floats or whatever. And I'm like, man, so this can get intricate. Like these fish must be super spooky.
They're not. And that's the thing. People make it out to be so much bigger in their minds than what it really is. It's as simple as, and you guys will see the correlations when I'm talking through this about bass fishing. The dirtier the water, what does that allow you guys
make
to
a little more noise, maybe, or use a bigger bait,
make a little bit more noise, size up your offering. You can use heavier line. You can throw a daggone rope in the water and be jerking them out because they're not seeing anything, right? So same kind of thing works in the fly world. So if you've got dirtier water, or you've got faster moving water or whatever, you can get away with a bigger strike indicator because they can't see it anyhow. So it doesn't matter, right? Color wise, you could go much brighter if you wanted to because fish can't see it anyhow, right? So as the water gets lower, slower, it gets clearer. You may size down that float so that it's not as noticeable. You may go from something that's bright yellow or bright orange to something that's white, right? So that it looks like foam on the water as opposed to something annoyingly bright, And so you're just changing up what you're rigged up with based on the conditions and how you think that fish is going to be able to see the offerings or not see the offerings, right? So when we're fishing streamers and we're subsurface, if the water's really dirty, I can have my fly line, which is that heavier, thick line, right? That most guys look at on a fly rod that aren't used to fly fishing. They're like, dude, man, what is that, right? So we run this big, thick fly line in order to cast the offering. So a fly rod, the whole mechanics around a fly rod is kind of the reverse of what spinning rods and bait casting rods and everything do. You guys use a weighted lure, right? And basically unweighted monofilament or braid, right? We do the opposite, and we're throwing a weighted line with oftentimes a weightless fly or lure on the end. So our line is carrying the offering, and you guys have the lure carrying the line, right? It's just a reverse, uh, process. And so we'll have our fly line, and if the water is super dirty, I may have 4 feet of mono, and that's it, right? Why? Because the water's so dirty, those fish can't see the fly line anyhow. But if that water goes crystal clear on me, or I'm fishing, a totally different, maybe I'm not fishing a river, maybe I'm fishing a lake, and that lake's gin clear, I may be running a 12-foot leader, right, of a fluoro, just because those fish can see everything, and they will be shy to that fly line up above, and so I've got to throw a really long leader on to get it away. So it's not as complex as it looks or sounds. It's more about what you're seeing. You're like, oh man, it's all this kind of stuff. No, it's different stuff for different conditions. That's all it is. There's no right or wrong way. It's all right. It just depends on when you're using it, right? So that's pretty easy. Your other question is if you were to come up and fish with us. We don't guide with spinning rods. Now, there are plenty of guys that fish for steelhead with spinning rods. They call them noodle rods. They're basically a longer spinning rod with a lighter tip section on them, and they'll run a similar setup as what you were just talking. They'll run floats, basically the same style stuff that we do, maybe a little bit different, but the whole principle is the same. Sometimes those guys are running spinning rods. They'll fish flies just like we are. Sometimes they'll run bait, but we don't typically use spinning rods, and we certainly don't carry the stuff to be able to rig them up. And do all that
your service is kind of selling that whole experience. If I was coming and was completely blind to all of it, you're willing to teach us and work through that with a new customer that's never fly fished at all.
Cool. For sure, yeah. And the steelheading is actually especially here, is a really easy entry point into the sport. It doesn't require a high level of skill right out of the gate. So you can come and you can start getting the basic principles of fly fishing, fishing for steelhead pretty easy. Now, if we said, hey, let's go chase some smallmouth, let's chase some pike, let's chase muskie, whatever, then it's going to require a little bit higher level of casting, because you're going to go from running a float or a bobber or an indicator, whatever you want to call it, and some split shot and a couple of flies, which you can do. A lot of our streams, man, if you can cast 30 feet, you're good. When we go to fish for smallmouth and that kind of thing, we go from bobbers and indicators and split shot and multiple flies. We call that indicator nymphing. That's the style of fishing that you're doing. We go from indicator nymphing to what we call stripping streamers. So stripping streamers would be the equivalent of you guys throwing crankbaits, right? So we're going to float down this river in our boat, and you're going to take these big streamers of various kinds. Nowadays, we tie flies that have as much movement as anything you guys have got in the gear world. It used to be that everybody always used to say, man, I wish we could tie a fly that moved like a Rapala, and now we can. Now we've got flies that have 6, 7, 8 joints in them. They swim just like a fish, man. And so we'll take that and tell our clients, like, we need you to cast that. If you can, skip it under that branch and knock on the front door, and then we're just stripping those flies, right? We're not reeling them, we're stripping them. And so you get that erratic, back and forth slashing movement, and sometimes you get those like with the big predator flies that we fish. They'll be hinged, and the whole idea is you strip it hard and you build that fly with a big bulky head so it pushes water. And when you strip it, that head brings it to a screeching halt, and the back end just hinges, and it has that whole 18-wheeler effect, right? Where that fish is swimming, and all of a sudden it just hinges sideways. And to a predatory fish, you show that side profile, dude, and it's on, right? And so we get to watch these eats, dude, that sometimes are a foot under the surface. You'll watch a big, fish come up and just crush it right in front of you, and that's pretty epic, man. It's awesome, but that requires a little bit more skill. Telling somebody to take this fly and skip it under that branch, that may be too much to ask for some anglers. So you just don't tell them to go there. You pick the openings and do what you can do, and they pull out a handful of nice smallmouth over the course of the day, and lose a fly to a toothy critter of some kind, and they'll talk about it for the next 10 years.
But-
Day.
So in explaining that, I noticed that I don't want to say your enthusiasm or your excitement kind of peaked up a little bit.
Mine was.
But, right. But we were certainly like intrigued. But I mean, do you prefer a certain species over steelhead? Or like, kind of tell us where you're at with that.
Yeah, people ask me all the time. They're like, "Man, what's your favorite fish?" And I honestly don't know that I can answer that question. I did steelhead for so long that I'm kind of in a season of my life now where I'm kind of circling back and pursuing, some of the things that I've missed over the years. Here locally, a lot of bass and that kind of thing. But I'm just as happy down in the salt chasing a tarpon or chasing bonefish or permit as I am here chasing steelhead. There's three different ways that we fish for steelhead. There's indicator nymphing, which is the lion's share of what we do. The next most popular is what they call swinging flies, and so that's where you basically you use a different skill set. It's definitely a higher skill level of spay casting is what we call it. And you'll make a cast anywhere from straight across stream to 45 degrees downstream, and you'll mend your line or put influence into your line, either speed it up or slow it down to get the presentation that you want, and at a certain level in the water column that you want. And then those fish will chase it down and thump it. So instead of getting a dead drift presentation like you do with a bobber and a couple of flies and it's static just floating with the bubbles, and you're waiting on that bobber to drop, the swinging streamers and then stripping streamers, which is what we do for the smallmouth and that kind of thing, is it's a little bit more aggressive. You're not going to catch as many fish, but you're going to catch the most aggressive fish that are there. And so it's kind of like, when I said, you start out deer hunting and you start out with the gun and you move to the bow. With steelheading, a lot of guys will start out indicator nymphing because that's the easiest, and then eventually they'll step up to swinging flies or stripping flies because it's the next step up, right? And I think there's the natural progression for everybody that they want to catch a fish, right? I want to catch a steelhead. They can't wait to catch a steelhead. Then they catch a steelhead, and then they want to catch as many steelhead as they can. And then they get through that phase, and then it's like, okay, I've caught my fair share of fish. Now I just want to catch those quality fish, and I'll be happy if I get that one every day, And so there's a little bit of a natural progression. I'm definitely there, man. I've caught enough steelhead to last a lifetime. And so when I go out, it's more about the experience. And so I really don't know that I've got a favorite fish to chase. I just like the thrill of the chase, man. I don't care what the species is. I like the challenge of going out and cracking the code, and making it happen. Whether I'm here locally or, chasing fish in the jungles of the Amazon, which I'm hoping to do sometime soon. I like getting out there, man, and just seeing things I've never seen before. I got friends over in Africa that send me pictures of these African tiger fish, man. They got these big fangs, that overlap each other. I'm like, bring it on, dude. I want to see one of those in the fly. So
Steelhead Alley Outfitters, what kind of reach or span or waters do you guys guide on? Like if I wanted to book a trip, could I say, hey, I want to go to Northwest Ohio or I want to go to New York or, how does that work?
Yeah. So we personally guide right here in the Northeast Ohio, Northwest PA area. We do, the streams along Lake Erie, and we also do some inland waters. We try not to be that guide service that says, oh, we guide everything. Cause I think that just, nobody knows that much water that well, so we've got friends and acquaintances in those other areas. And if somebody calls us and says, hey, we want to go fish, we'll just say, we want to go fish the Cattaraugus over in New York. I say, well, let me call my buddy Vince. because my buddy Vince got his crew over there and they've got that place dialed. So you guys need to hook up with them because they're going to give you the best experience. I could take you over there and I could try and guide you, but you're not going to get the experience that you deserve. And so we stay here local to Northeast Ohio, Northwest PA, and do both, the Erie tribs as well as the inland streams.
If I wanted to book a spring trip with you, how far in advance should I think about scheduling that?
It seems like people are booking earlier and earlier every year, but for a spring trip, most of the time, if you need to be calling by beginning of January to try and get the best dates. Depends on the year. It's variable every year, but by January, if you want your pick a day, if you want your pick of dates every year, I'd say sometime in January you need to be making the phone call and getting on the books.
And then I would imagine the fall is similar. Like once the weather and the water starts cooling down, they'll start moving in.
Yep. And that's going to be highly variable on the year too. So, yep. But most of the time, we tell people if we're going off of historical data, typically we've got fish in the rivers in fishable numbers with some water that's fishable by mid-October, and then it goes all the way until things freeze up. So typically we'll book trips as early as the middle of October. We won't go any earlier than that unless we know we've got water, and we kind of take that on a case-by-case scenario. But like this last fall was hands down the worst fall we have ever seen. It was the worst fall that some people have seen in like 40-plus years. We had no water, man. I mean, our streams, there were sections of stream that didn't have water flowing. They had stopped flowing. And so as it were, we ended up losing a huge portion of our season in the fall because we had no water. We went from no water to too much water to everything freezing up on us. And so I think we got 15% of our trips in the fall. Canceled 85.
That drought was killer, man.
It was unprecedented, man.
I mean, our inland reservoirs were down 6-8 feet, some of them. So,
oh man, dude, that's crazy. Yeah. So it was bad. It was really bad. But yeah, we're back up and running, and things seem to be back on step right now. So we're hoping next fall is a whole different story.
People will be itching to fish. I've noticed that fishing was horrible about everywhere in this region last year from the dry weather. So it's got people fired up to get out this spring, I guess, is one positive of it.
Yeah, for sure.
But now, let's say I don't care about steelhead that much, and I just want to come and learn how to fly fish and catch a smallmouth or a pike or something like that. Like, I could just as easily book a trip in June. Is that true?
Yeah. So the good thing about when we cross over into the warm water, we do actually bring spinning rods along when we do that. So most of our smallmouth stuff, with the exception of some of the Lake Erie smallmouth, if we're fishing on the Lake Erie tributaries, we can still walk those and fish for the smallmouth. But the inland streams, most of those are not walkable, so you have to float them. So most of the time when we're running smallmouth trips inland, and even some of the ones that if we float some of the water on the Lake Erie trips, we do carry spinning rods along with us. So when you're casting all day long, sometimes it's nice to have a spinning rod there just to take a break, and who doesn't like a whopper plopper from time to time? So so we'll run some Ned rigs or whopper ploppers and that kind of thing, just kind of as a way to give some people a break. Or if somebody comes and they're like, man, I really am not picking this up, or they don't want to, maybe you'll have somebody that wants to fly fish and somebody's like, no, I'm good with a spinning rod. We'll throw them on a spinning rod. But yeah, you could absolutely come out. May and June are our big months, for chasing the bass. And so that's what we do. So as soon as steelhead season is over, we try and turn turn to the smallmouth game.
Do you guys take groups, individuals, both? And how much should someone expect to pay for either a half day, a full day, however you do that?
Yeah, so we do everything from singles all the way up to groups. Again, it just depends on how many guides we've got available for the day. But everybody in our on our staff has a raft, and those rafts will fit 2 anglers. So you got 2 anglers and a guy rowing. If we've got a group, I think most of the time the biggest groups we do with floats are typically like 2 to 3 boats. But we have done group trips, group floats, and people really enjoy doing that. But you can go out, one person. The average is groups of 2, but we do get a fair amount of single anglers, both men and women, that come out and fish with us. So if you're coming out for a float trip, you're looking at a price point of $550. And that's for the day. That's use of the equipment. Also get you lunch for the day. And again, that's 1 or 2 anglers. So whether you come by yourself or you bring somebody with you, it's $550. And for a walk wade trip, which is what we do a lot for steelhead, we float and walk wade for steelhead. You're looking at $450 a day for a walk wade trip. And again, that's 1 or 2 people. So half day. We can do half day walk wade trips, and those are $350 for a half day. So we always tell everybody, it's like you're better off just going with the full day trip, because you're spending $100 more and getting twice the amount of time. So sometimes people want to book that because that's the only window of time they've got. They got like 4 hours. They want to give it a shot, and we're like, okay, cool. If that's what you got to work with, we'll roll. But if you got the whole day, it's going to be a better investment going with the full day trip. So that being the case, we don't run hardly any half day trips. It's all full day. And as far as the floats are concerned, most of the float trips that we take are it just doesn't make sense to do a half day. I mean, a half day is 4 hours. So if you do a half day float trip, and that float trip normally takes an 8-hour day, you're going to fish 2 hours and then spend the next 2 hours trying to row to get back to your truck. So it doesn't make sense to do float trips on a half day basis, just because we don't have stretches around here that are broken up with such short floats, that you can easily just leisurely go cover, a stretch of river in 4 hours. And so as it is, we most of our float trips are full day.
Not bad at all. Grab a buddy, go check it out for a day. I mean, that's not much more than pulling a boat a couple hours through a good lake, and you factor in your fuel and everything. It's not a bad value at all, man. So that's great.
What about do you guys have like a fly shop or anything along those lines, or is it just strictly the guide service?
Yeah, we're just strictly a guide service. We don't have a fly shop. There's some other fly shops in the area that we work in conjunction with. We've always had a good relationship with all the fly shops around. The guy that I actually started Steelhead Alley with, he actually moved up to Ypsilanti, Michigan. And one of our partner shops is up there, Schultz Outfitters, and he's the shop manager up there now. And so we work closely with them. And then we've got the other major fly shop that we've got here in our immediate area is Chagrin River Outfitters. And so if people need stuff, we just send them to the local fly shops, and we're just strictly a guide service. And that is for both local stuff here and destination stuff. So we also host to destinations abroad. So I take groups of anglers to Alaska and down to the Caribbean and out west. So we'll get groups of anglers together and travel and go have fun.
Awesome. How do I book one of those? Because that's more appealing to leave Ohio and go catch something for me.
For sure.
Yeah, especially in the middle of winter. So get on our e-blast list and watch for the offerings that come out. Check our website out, and you can look at our destinations page and see if we're hosting anything for the coming year. And just reach out to us. No different than what you would if you were booking any other trip. Just reaching out and saying, "Hey, man, I'm interested in getting on board with that. How do I sign
Now,
up?"
did I see that you guys
And
have something on your website currently?
you might have seen an
Yep.
Alaska trip.
Okay.
Yep.
And how many spaces do you have available for that?
That one actually just got
Oh, okay.
canceled. So that one is actually coming off the website. But no, it all depends on the year. Most of the time, an average year, I'm going to have about 10 spots. If I've got if I've got a large group that books out of the gate, I mean, the largest group we've ever taken was I think we had 23
Oh,
or
wow.
24 guys went to Alaska with us. So we had 3 hosts. It was myself and a couple of the guides that went with me. So that's the exception. That's definitely not the rule. Most of the time, I'm going to have groups of anywhere from 5 to 10, maybe 12 that go with me on these trips. So,
Nice.
yep. But yeah, it's fun. Getting out and seeing new places is an exciting time, guys.
What else do we need to know? Do our listeners need to know about Steelhead Alley Outfitters, about the region, about steelhead fishing, fly fishing? Like, what's a good nugget or takeaway that you can leave us with?
That's a good question. I would say a good nugget as far as just fly fishing in general.
It could be about life too, whatever you want.
Yeah, I would say don't sell fly fishing short. I think too many people have put it in a box and they think it's like something this big, and it's literally. I mean, um, I think fly fishing has the opportunity to take you further and to more places around the world than what I've ever been offered with gear. You just don't hear of guys chasing species literally all over the world in all kinds of exotic places with gear. At least I don't. But when it comes to fly fishing, literally, there's no place other than like the Arctic that I know of that people don't chase fish with a fly rod. And so I think a lot of people just they put it in that hole of trout fishing only. So I would just say just know that fly fishing is so much more. You may not ever have the chance to travel somewhere abroad, but let me tell you, it's a load of fun to go out with a dry fly of just about any kind on a farm pond loaded with bluegill bigger than your hand, and you can have an absolute riot. And especially if you got kids or grandkids, there's not a whole lot better than going and having that kind of an experience. So don't sell fly fishing short. I think too many people put it in a box, and I don't know they do that intentionally, but I think just based on what they've seen, right? So that's that. As far as about us as Steelhead Alley Outfitters, we are, as far as I know, the oldest and one of the most respected guide services on the alley. Now, there are some guides, uh, solitary, single guides that have been on the alley longer than us that are definitely stand up guys in operations. But we are the longest standing and one of the most respected guide services out there on the alley. There's maybe one or two others that may be close to as big as we are, but we've been around for a while, and our reputation backs us up. So if you're looking for somebody who's reliable and trustworthy and has the history to show it, that's us. So,
Awesome, man.
Awesome.
Well, hey, we can't thank you enough for coming on here. I mean, we really appreciate it because we're bass guys. A lot of our listeners probably come from the bass world, at least right now, and this is just a good educational moment for us to just kind of soak it in and learn from you. And so
yeah.
thanks you so much for coming on, and we appreciate it, man.
Yeah,
Yeah, man.
absolutely.
It's an honor to be here, and glad we could come and be a part and
Yeah.
talk the sport, man. It's fishing is fishing, man, regardless of the rod in your
Right.
hand.
I will.
Well, go back and listen to our first couple episodes because Jesse was kind of poking
Yeah.
fun of fly fishermen.
That's what I was going to say. I was a little insecure for this, but I wanted to, I wanted to hear it out because we're all just fishing addicts at the end of the day. And I did pick on Aaron a little bit when he said that fly fishing was what he would pick up if he couldn't bass fish anymore. But it's just all in good fun. You know how it is. That's how you show love is you make fun of the ones you like the most. So. But dude,
Right.
you know your stuff, obviously, and I'm highly impressed that you can hear the years of experience. And I didn't really get to chat with you at the Great Lakes Expo, but I talked to one of your guys, and you got some cool hip dudes running with you that obviously all know their stuff. So, like Aaron said, thanks for coming on and educating me, and I'll definitely give it a shot at some point here when I get the chance.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, if I ever get a chance to put a streamer rod in your hand and let you throw some swim flies for a smallmouth, I'll have you begging to get back on the boat.
It sounds just like a glide bait bite, the way you're describing, where you can turn that thing right around and then they just T-bone it.
Well, maybe we should come get you on the boat with us.
Yeah, it sounds like a trade.
We can get some gear in your hand, and you can get a fly rod in our hand, and we'll just split up.
Let's do it, man. I would be a happy man. I tell people all the time, I'm like, if I had any choice of what I could do in the dead heat of summer, just give me a bait casting rod with the old Texas rig rubber worm, buddy, and spent a lot of hours growing up.
Yeah,
man, I had a lot of fun, man. I grew up on about a 25-acre lake, and I had the poor man's bass boat, but it was the boat my dad let me use. Man, I spent a lot of days standing on the bow of that boat catching 5 and 6 pound fish, on worms. And man, I just love it. Still this day, man. There's nothing like watching that worm get picked up and start moving. Love it.
And that's the thing. That's all you need. It's not as complicated as we all tend to make it. So you got to remember what it's all about at the end of the day. So.
Lastly, let's tell our listeners where they can find you guys, follow you guys, learn about you guys. Like what social medias are you on? Your website.
Yep.
What do you got?
Yeah, we're on Facebook and Instagram. Steelhead Alley Outfitters. You can just look that up. You'll find us. And our website is pretty easy. It's www.steelheadalleyoutfitters.com. So check that out. And if you want to call us, you can get us on 888-453-5899.
Awesome. Call and book a trip, guys and gals. So, all right.
Yeah, we get a lot of ones.
Well, thanks again for coming on, and let's book a trip.
Awesome, man. Thanks for chatting, guys. Enjoyed it.
We'll talk to you. And one more thing, guys, if you're finding any value in these, it will help us a ton wherever you're listening, it be Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. If you could please subscribe or even leave us a comment of some type of content you would want to hear.